Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Melina, and I'm an advisory board member of Forma. And I'm happy to introduce to you all Deb White. She's going to be talking to us about letting go, which I think we're in constant, that's the human experience, right? Letting go. And she's going to talk about how one size does not fit all, and understanding our personality traits is going to help us let go so that God can do what God does. So, without further ado, I'm going to let Deb take it over.
Thank
Welcome.
you. Thank you, Melina. Thank you. So this presentation comes out of my kind of odd background. I always say that you will never meet another priest that's been charged with assault at a California correctional facility. And maybe I'll tell that story later. But basically, before I was a priest, I was a forensic neuropsychologist. And actually, I still have a license. So I tend to look at things probably maybe a little bit differently than a lot of Episcopal priests. And one of the things I always think about is the social science research. I'm still kind of a social scientist in a lot of ways. And of course, one of the things we are all talking about is how to be church. And we're talking about it obviously at Forma this year, and how to be church in the 21st century. I approached this from my own personal background and how I kind of look at things in a unique way. So one size does not fit all. So we're going to start looking into one size does not fit all from the perspective of our personalities and how that works out. So I think we can bring up the PowerPoint at this point. There we are. One size does not fit all. How knowing our personality traits, or really knowing ourselves, as opposed to thinking about the people we want to bring into the church, thinking about the people who are in the church, i.e. us, will help us hook up with those folks. So let's look at the next slide. Because I'm not. The fault, dear Brutus, is not in our stars, but in ourselves. I like Shakespeare, so I like to quote a little Shakespeare at the beginning. And what I'm saying here is that maybe it's not about what plans we pick or what thinking we are doing about how we should operationalize things, but maybe we should be looking at who we are. And here's the joke. Here is the poor pastor, and it says on the ground, "Welcome to our new pastor." And there he is, and he is throwing out the letters of the last thing he put up on the church board, which was week 3, 7 things this church needs to and out he goes out the door. Well, so much for his plans. So the elephant in the room. And the elephant in the room is always this question where we get together at these conferences or we're in a meeting together. And the question is always underlying for all of us: how are we going to save the church? And the reason we have these questions is because of these numbers. So this is a page from the most recent parochial report that was put out by the Episcopal Church. This happens to be a page that has Province 7s and 8s totals in Province 9, and that's because that is where I hail from. So it has the Diocese of California, which is my diocese, on it. And so this is the page that I myself have stared at the most often. But I think that if you look at the parochial report from the Episcopal Church, you will find that your particular diocese, wherever you might be from, is going to have similar numbers. And those numbers, of course, are the percent change numbers, are generally have a minus in front of them. And if you look at this page, you will see that all the dioceses listed on this page have minus numbers on them, and the province totals have minus numbers on them. And of course, those of us who love the Episcopal Church take these minus numbers to heart and worry about them. And so the question has been for years and continues to be, and perhaps will continue to be, how do we get more folks to come through our doors? So a lot of very good and good thinking folks have had a lot of good and good thinking suggestions on how to do just that. Something just happened. Can we get that sharing again?
You'll need to reshare it, Deb, and then I can start it up.
Okay. I don't know why I stopped sharing it. Can you help me tell me where to reshare it?
Sure. So you're going to look at the Restream in the Chrome tab, and you'll see the microphone, the video, and then the 3 dots. And then you will find the screen share from there.
There it is. Okay, thank you very much. So,
Deb, it is not up. I need you to try that one more time. I don't see it as an option to bring it up. So just do that process for me one more time. All right, now I see it, so I'm going to go ahead and share it.
There we go. Okay, thank you. So it's no secret that church membership and attendance have declined, and this has been exacerbated by the pandemic. And this is not restricted to our denomination or to Christian churches. This is true of almost all faith groups worldwide. And so faith leaders are trying desperately to find ways to bring people back home. And so we have here a little cartoon of Pope Francis and one of his associates saying, will people come back after the pandemic? And Pope Francis saying, I hope so. I think they want church. And the associate saying, what they want is to gather at table with family and friends to eat and drink and sing. And Pope Francis saying, isn't that what Mass is supposed to be? And then the assistant saying, well, maybe we should have called it happy hour. So, you know, this is kind of how we're thinking, like, how do we re-communicate with people? How do we reach people in the way they're thinking? How do we speak differently? How do we communicate differently? How do we reach people on different platforms? We're trying to work together to go out and invite folks in. So here are some of the ideas that you may have heard that I have heard over time. Shorten our sermons. That's always an idea, isn't it? Modernize our music. It's never clear to me what modernize means. Certainly we in California have had, we had the Beyonce Mass that was very popular. Back in the day, there was the Eucharist. Other folks have had, you know, there's camp services. There's many ideas about what modernizing music means or changing music means. Emphasize the Bible over prayer book worship is one that I've heard recently. Encourage lay testimony. Instead of having sermons, have parts of the service where folks talk about their experience, tell their own stories, and evangelize. And of course, this is something that historically has not been associated with the Episcopal Church, but there is no reason, and there's ample evidence that a lot of Episcopalians do this extremely well. And we can do this and do this. So these are some of the ideas and some of the things that are actually happening. that folks say will encourage folks to come into Episcopal churches. Okay, so I'm going to give an illustration of something that I think happens when folks are working really, really hard to think of ways that what they want to do is bring folks into the church, and how our personalities or the personality of our organizations might get in the way of that. So what I'm going to do is what we used to call in social work a reframe. So what I've talked about so far is kind of the way that we in the church have kind of thought about ways in which we could bring folks or invite folks into the church and empower ourselves to invite people with more creativity and energy and enthusiasm to come and join us in the church, which are all great things. But what I find we don't look at is things about ourselves or ourselves writ large as an institution that impede our ability to do that. So this is a little snapshot of my own church. That's our bell tower, and it has our 150-year-old bell hanging there, of which we are very proud. And I'm going to read you a little bit of the profile that I responded to when I came to our church, which is called Grace. Here on a holy hill, we are missing a member of our family. We seek a rector to join our parish to guide and comfort us, to laugh and cry with us, and nourish us. We seek a rector who values pastoral care, including building personal connections to the congregation. We are looking for a leader who will work with us in actively adding new members. We want a rector who will be a presence in our community and participate in local outreach. Now, I encourage you to either speak up or and let us know that you have a comment, or you can actually make a note in the chat. But I'd be interested to see what you are hearing in that description of the rector that this parish is looking for. I have a note on there that says competing goals. So that's a hint as to what I kind of thought when I read. Now I've summarized this. So let's think about this for a moment. This was not all kind of together in the parish, and I'm going to give everybody kind of a second to see if anyone feels moved to put anything in the chat before I kind of give you my opinions. But what do you see, those of you who are with us, what do you see in this particular paragraph that might be conflicting with it? Okay, I will start issuing my opinion. So in this, the first thing I see is we want a rector to guide and comfort us, laugh and cry with us, who values pastoral care, personal connection. So this particular parish, someone says, we seek a rector who values pastoral care, personal connections, right? So this is a rector who works with individuals and pays a lot of attention to individuals, which is great. I think rectors should. And this church in particular described itself as a family. There was a lot of emphasis in the interviews about this church seeing itself as a family. Melina, are there comments at this point?
Yes. Sorry, I was pulling them up. There's just a little bit of delay. So there was a comment on, do we want internal care while also working outside the parish to bring in new folks?
Exactly. Right.
And then the other thing folks mentioned, to help us grow and remain the same.
Exactly. Yes.
And right. The laity can fulfill these. Well, let's see. What happened to the idea of the rector as challenging the congregation? This is very static, also nourishing.
Good.
And a partner to do with, not a top-down leader to do for.
Yeah.
I don't want to miss anybody. To focus is inward and outward. Help us grow and remain the same, which I mentioned before.
Yeah. Good. Good. Yeah. So you're seeing some of the same things that I saw, right? So we want to be a family. We want our rector to be part of the family, to focus inward, as someone just said. And we want that rector to make us known to the community, to be active in the community. And we want that rector to nurture us, which is fine. But also we want that rector to be out there in the community and actively bringing new people in. And when I interviewed for the position, I kind of gently said, do you see any conflict in it? And of course, the folks did not, right? They said, well, this looks right. And so the question I had was, who is going to do these things? Who will do these things? And who wants to do these things, right? Is it the rector? Do you want a rector that is oriented toward pastoral care and toward evangelism, which is possible, right? Or do we want, as I think someone suggested, to raise up the parish and the congregation itself so that we have a congregation of people that does these things? And does this particular parish want to do these things, right? Do they really want this parish that describes itself as a family that identifies with this one-to-one taking care of one another? They say they want the rector to bring in new people, but is that what they want? So here's my question. Who's going to do these things? Is it the person who posts this meme about the Episcopal Church that says, has our friend Elizabeth II, give me that old time religion, give me that old Anglican religion. It was good enough for Elizabeth that it's good enough for me. Is that the person that wants to do it? Or how about the person that says progressive or traditional? Why not both? That's the Episcopal Church. Or is it the person who says, brethren, I welcome thee. Welcome to the Ezekiel Emmanuel Ebenezer Episcopalian Pentecostal Baptist Calvinist Church of the Golden Oxymoron. Amen. These are all ways that Episcopalians see themselves, right? These are all ways that we identify as being Episcopalian. And these are all ways that affect how we welcome people into our midst. And these people who post these memes, and these are all memes that I have had posted, on Facebook that have been shared with me, all indicate an attitude about how we approach, how we invite and welcome people into our church. These are us. But we do not seek to know one another before we start looking at these plans for how to bring others in. So my question is, when we come up with these plans to bring people into our midst, are we prepared to carry them out in a fully engaged, enthusiastic, and loving way? Because if you say, okay, I'm going to do this to bring folks in, and that's not really what you're comfortable doing, that's going to fail. So I'm going to talk about taking a minute to look at who we are, because we need to know what we really want. What was written in that profile was not really clear about what those folks in my parish really wanted, because it turned out they weren't completely clear on what they wanted, which was okay, because then when I got there, we did a little more work to figure that out. But, you know, like the Spice Girls said, tell me what you want, what you really, really want. So I'm going to jump into psychologist mode, or as I like to say sometimes, this is Dr. White talking, not Reverend Deb. Personality is a set of traits that, taken together, describe an individual. Personality evolves over time, but overall it is remarkably consistent. Who you are as a kid is often who you are as an adult. You can evolve, you can become a better person, you can become a more difficult person, you are affected by the things that happen to you, but at core, who you are remains remarkably consistent. And please, for all of you just groaned, that is not a bad thing. That is not a bad thing. Who you are is a really good thing. You are as God made you, and that's a good thing, okay? Now, psychologists and other mental health professionals administer psychological tests to assess personality, and they do it for a lot of different reasons. So this is something that I used to do for a living. They do it to determine whether or not people need psychological treatment or psychiatric treatment or medication. They do it for legal assessments, right? This is something I used to do. I used to work for the courts, and I used to determine whether people were, I used to testify as an expert witness. So I was asked to offer an opinion about whether people were not guilty by reason of insanity or not competent to stand trial, or whether they should be placed in a hospital or placed in a prison. Those are the kind of legal assessments people are asked to do. They're asked to do them to assess people's ability to function in specific situations. And people do it for research purposes because they're interested in, you know, knowing how people function and what they do and what they will do. So there are different types of personality tests, and many of these tests should only be administered by professionals, okay? So I'm not suggesting everybody run out and start taking all those tests on the internet and start testing themselves. That's not a good idea. Those of you who are clergy persons who are watching this have probably taken at least some of these tests, because clergy persons are required to have psychological testing, and some of you will have taken a lot of the same tests. Some of you who are not clergy persons may have taken some of these tests. Some of you may have done some of these, what we call self-assessment measures. Sometimes we do them at vestry retreats. Sometimes we do seminars on them. Some of them are very popular in the church for kind of a self-assessment, for working on yourself. Just know the limitations and the appropriate circumstances for being able to take a test yourself, for getting an internet version of a test, and for actually taking a test from a professional. So some of the better known psychological tests, personality measures, the MMPI, the Rorschach, which is the inkblot tests, the 16PF, the NEO, the Myers-Briggs, which was very, very popular for quite a while as a self-assessment. A lot of you can probably rattle off your Myers-Briggs profile. The Enneagram, which is very popular right now. and the Big Five inventory. So we're going to talk about the Big Five inventory a little bit more specifically. So the Big Five inventory was developed, I think they started working on about 50 years ago. A lot of different researchers have worked on it. There are a lot of different versions of it. But basically what they hypothesized is that there were 5 basic areas of personality. It's a self, and they developed these self-report measures to kind of help people look at these 5 areas of personality. These 5 areas of personality are openness, and this is kind of, they're all like this versus this. So openness versus like shyness. So, or a willing, not shyness. I guess it's better to say openness versus, so it describes basically an openness to experience, an openness to try new things, an openness to the world. So the opposite of that would be an unwillingness to try new things, a personal fear of going out into the world, and an uncomfortableness with new ideas. So it's openness versus sort of a closed perspective, a very rigid idea of the world. Conscientiousness, that's somebody who dots their I's and crosses their T's and turns their papers in on time. That's Hermione Granger. Versus somebody that leaves the towel on the floor every day and cannot be relied upon. When you say, can you do this for me? My husband got very irritated because my eldest child was not really carrying out her part of the family cooking regime, wasn't taking her turn. And he would say, who's cooking tonight? And I said, Theo. And he said, oh, good. Theo, surprise. Surprise, no dinner. So that's the opposite of conscientiousness. Extroversion. Extroversion is exactly what we know it to be. Likes to be with people, thrives off being people, versus introverts who are much more comfortable being with self, really thrives off the quiet, and much more internal rejuvenation of energies. Agreeableness is someone that really likes to get along and really thinks about other people and tries to make things comfortable with other people. The opposite of that are folks that really tend not to be too concerned about what's going on with other people. And neuroticism, they have better names for this now, but basically is if you identify yourself as being anxious and worried a lot. And then the opposite of that is you feel pretty comfortable in the world, pretty balanced. It's kind of an old term, and it's kind of a little bit of a, it's not a great term, but that's the old term for it. So these are the terms that they had for these 5 inventories, okay? And they are self-report measures. So these are not how the world identifies you. It's how you identify yourself. So this is how you see yourself. This may or may not be accurate, okay, to how the world sees you. You are not measuring traits as identified by other people. You are measuring traits as identified by yourself. So again, extroversion, just what you might think. Outgoing, energetic, assertive. Agreeableness, just as it sounds. Kindness, compassion, empathy. Conscientious, organized, thorough, detail-oriented. Neuroticism, the opposite, emotional stability, anxiousness, worry, and then openness to experience, willingness to try new things, and an imaginative approach to problem solving, creativity. Okay, So here's what I want to get at. There have been a lot of studies using psychological tests about religious people. And so they've done tests about varying religions, some about religious and some about Christians and some about specific groups. So you have to look at the studies very specifically. So I've tried to gear my review of the literature specifically to Christians. But here's some of the stuff they found. People who have high agreeableness, so that's people who are more compassionate or identify as being more compassionate, and conscientious, are more likely to be religious. If you think about that, that makes sense. Roman Catholic priests have high agreeableness and low neuroticism scores, so they don't identify as being anxious. Religious sisters, so nuns, the traditional spelling of nuns with an N-U-N-S, are more likely to be conscientious. Individuals with higher openness may be less likely to embrace formal religious beliefs. So these folks that are open to new experiences and more likely to kind of go skydiving and think in these broad ways are less likely to be formally religious. Now, what I'd be interested in seeing is a study on spiritual but not religious, right? I don't know. That's just me. But traits linked to certain religious followers like conscientiousness and openness are linked to better coping responses. So when they do these studies of people who are having distress, they find that people who are religious, and specifically the people who are conscientious and open to new experience, right, which is kind of an odd combination in these studies, they're better coping. So that's interesting. So spiritual practice of any kind is good for you, and especially now when the world is stressed out, because traits linked to certain religious people, like those people that are conscientious and open, that little group, have better coping responses in severe adversity, not just overall, but in severe adversity, like times we're in now. And basic religious beliefs have a positive relationship with good characteristics that help people resolve challenges in their lives. So basically, there's a selling point. Religion is good for you. It's also been linked to a lot of health outcomes, good health outcomes like lower blood pressure, fewer heart attacks, I think, a lot of things like that. You can look up those studies as well. So let's find out who we are, who's here today, who we are as a group. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to take a little test. So this is the Big 5 personality test. I will tell you right off the top that this is an open source. It's going to ask you a couple of research questions. It's going to ask you your age. You're going to have to answer the age question. You don't have to answer all of the other questions, but you do have to answer the age question because we're being allowed to take this because we're contributing to this person's research. And that's how we're allowed to do it, so that it's kosher. So there's the website addresses there, and it's also in the chat. And I've given you a QR code. So if you, like me, have your phone with you and you have a scanner on your phone, or you have a QR code reader, you can just put it up to your whatever you're watching this on. If you're watching it on your phone, you're kind of out of luck, but you can use the actual website address, and you're going to click on that, or you're going to scan it and go click on that, and you are going to go to that website. So it'd be really helpful. I know there's a little delay on this, but it would be really helpful if in the chat you could let us know if you got there. And if you get there, you're going to get there, and it's going to come up with the test. The test has about, I think it has 40 questions, which sounds like a lot, but you're going to go breezing through them. It is a multiple choice question. Good. I'm hearing that some people are there.
Yeah, people are getting there, Deb. I got there.
Yay,
I'm
Melina.
already like, ooh.
You go, Melina. I want you to take it, Melina. I want you to take it.
What does it mean? I don't want to answer anything on the far left or the far right. Just right in the middle.
You're giving things away right now, Melina. I'm analyzing what you just said.
Go ahead, you can. All right. Yeah, looks like folks are jumping in.
Good. And I don't want to be too distracting, but you can see it's not that difficult. I'll tell you a funny story you don't have to pay attention to while you're doing it, so that you can listen to me droning if you're bored. I used to have a patient, that was at one of my, when I worked at the prison, and she used to call me the shrinker lady. And every time I just looked at her, she'd say, "Stop shrinking me." So nowadays people do it less because they don't really know what I'm doing. But every once in a while, I'll say something like, "Oh, why do you think that?" And people will say, "Stop shrinking me." So keep filling it out. And it takes about 5 minutes. So I'm going to look at my clock, and I'm going to give you about that amount of time. And then if you want to put in the chat as you're finishing it, so that we get a sense of when people are done. Okay, yeah, so we're getting there. So here I'm going to go on.
Folks are finishing up.
Okay, so now you have your next test part. See, doing the test is part of the test. This is the intelligence test part, is whether you can do it. No, I'm just kidding. That's a joke. But here's the next part. I want you to go to this website, or again, you can scan the QR code, and I want you to report your results. So you're going to get 2 questions, one of which is report your highest score, and one of which is report your lowest score. And if you really don't want to type the word conscientiousness, you can put a C in, because they all have different letters. And they're anonymous, obviously. It's just going to give us a little summary of everybody that's here. So now go into this website, and it's going to give you the 2 questions. First, it's going to say, what was your highest score? And then it's going to ask you, what was your lowest score? And then again, if you could let us know when you've reported your results, that would be great.
And everyone, you can just type in slido.com and then enter that code if you're having any trouble.
So it should come up at the end when you're done. You should get a summary, and it'll give you all 5 of your scores. So you're going to have to look and see which is your highest and your lowest. It'll give you a number. So the questions, the only thing you're going to see on the Slido page is the questions. Do we not see the questions on the Slido page?
You won't see it until you go to the next.
No, they don't see the question to ask.
You won't see this until you go to the next slide.
So Christopher, Molly, do you guys see that?
Slide. One question at a time. You got to go to the next slide. Now they see the question.
Okay, now I'm sorry. I needed to advance my thing. I hadn't advanced my thing. So now you should see those questions. There you are. That was me. That was me. See, I failed the intelligence part right there. Now we know where I end up on intelligence. Who gave me a PhD?
I'm too slow, so.
No, look at this. See, this is really, well, you guys keep doing your part, but I'm just going to sit here and be fascinated. I have no idea. 5.
Deb, do you recommend doing this with your staff or Sunday school volunteers or?
You know, you can. It's like anything else. Actually, we at my church, we just had a conversation about this, and we didn't do it with the testing. Kind of depends on how many people you have and, you know, how people engage. I always find that people like quizzes, right? And people like tests, and people like to know more about themselves. So I used to do the Myers-Briggs on vestry retreats. I find my bishop is a fan of the Enneagram. And so when you chat with him about stuff, he likes to chat about the Enneagram. So, are most folks done with this question? And I'll go on to the next one.
It looks like folks are getting there.
Okay.
Since we have 15 minutes left in this session, I think we can move forward.
Yes, people ready? Okay. All right, and then this is, what did you score the lowest in? So I think that, you know, it's always helpful to kind of have, it gives you things to talk about. I think when I do these things on vestry meetings, it helps you know who's in the room, right? I mean, if you're in the room with a bunch of people that make decisions, if we know that we're all people that like to think about things and have to have processing time, that's different than being in a room with people who make decisions quickly. And conflict can occur when the folks that are in the room that want to make decisions quickly don't give those folks who need processing time their processing time. So measures like this, I think, really help people to understand that we're all really different. We need to be able to adjust in how we're working together to suit different personalities. Okay. So how are we doing now? Did most folks get a chance to enter theirs?
I think so. I think people are getting there.
Okay. So we want to get a little bit of a chance to talk about, I'm going to let you keep entering and we'll talk a little bit and then maybe we'll go back to these slides as we keep going. All right. So So who are we, right? So as individuals, we are as many and varied as the stars in the sky. In research, and we're going to go back and see if this is true, is religious people tend to be conscientious, agreeable, and generally pretty healthy, not incredibly anxious or people that don't want to engage. As a denomination, I would guess, based on just, historical data and how we worship and practice our religion, we are more likely to test higher on openness dimension. Now, anybody who wants to jump in the chat or say anything at this point, I'm happy to hear that. I'll tell you why I think that. We pride ourselves as Episcopalians on being a thinking church. I have on my email, it says the opposite of faith is not doubt. The opposite of faith is fear. We say doubt is good. Jesus never told anyone not to ask a question. No one ever said, Jesus, what about this? And Jesus said, shut up, I don't answer questions. That never happened, right? Doubt is good. Questioning is good. Asking questions is good. And Episcopalians pride ourselves on thinking and talking and working things through, which is really the same method that Jewish rabbis used, which is what Jesus was, right? So openness, which is not a dimension I think you would find in other denominations. I think that folks who are drawn to other denominations might not be high in openness because they would not be open to that level of doubt and discussion. But again, in your chat, feel free to put some disagreement or other. What we are not is generally high on extroversion and sometimes openness in that way. In general. And we may be agreeable to a fault, right? We are not out there shouting, which is good. And also maybe we have a squeaky wheel problem. Now, so what questions, we're going to go back and look at those slides again, but what questions do we need to ask to figure out what we need to know before jumping in with these plans for church growth? So for example, I'm going to give you just a couple of quick examples, and then I'm going to take this last 10 minutes or so we can really talk about this a little bit. The church that I went to, they wanted this staying a family, nurturing one another, and then they wanted to grow. And they specifically wanted that very coveted 18 to 35-year-old growth, right? Well, one of the things that we talked about was, we could do all these things to attract younger folks. But I will tell you that when eventually we combined our 8 and 10 o'clock services, one of the first things that happened was my door swung open and my seniors started coming in telling me I had to get those parents to make those children behave because those children didn't behave in church. And their children didn't know how to behave in church. And then the door swung closed and swung open again. And all the parents of my young kids came in and said, those seniors are giving my kids the hairy eyeball. Make them stop giving those kids the hairy eyeball, right? So there was an issue. Okay. One of the other things that happens is my leadership in my church now is, I would say, about equally represented. We have, in my vestry, we have people in their 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s. Really. I think we have someone represented in all of those decades. And we have people on the younger end in, leadership. This is working out fine. But a few years ago, a lot of the feedback when younger folks and newer folks started to become involved in leadership was that these new people were in leadership and they did not know how to do things. They didn't know how things were done, right? But in order to know what attracts people in those age groups and attracts people, and you need to talk to them and you need to have them in your leadership, right? So these are all conflicting things. So what I encourage people to think about is, if you're going to invite and welcome people, then you have to invite and welcome them and know that they are not going to be the same as you. They are going to be different. And so you need to know who you are and who you have among you and what barriers you have inside yourself that are going to come up that you need to look at when people come in that are different than you. And you need to look at how you can welcome and invite them in ways that are authentic to who you are. If you hate modern music and you start doing modern music because you think that's the way to get the young people in, and you bring them in and then you resent them for that modern music, that is not the way to a loving, growing church, right? So who are we asking to join us? Are they like us or are they different? Are we ready to welcome them? Are we willing to change for them? And are we able to change for them? What do we need to let go in ourselves in order to truly love and welcome our neighbors who are different than us and love them as much as ourselves? And how amazing would it be if we really could do it, if we really welcome everyone? Okay, so I'm going to go popping back quickly to make you nauseous and see if those slides have changed at all. So most of us, see that agreeable? We're all lovely. Look at how lovely we are. Lovely people. And see what I'm saying? Nobody is really stressed, right? And then some of us, see, we're a mixed group. Some of us are ready for new experiences. Some of us, not so much. Some of us ready to dot those T's. Some of us want to leave the towel on the floor. And some of us are ready to do that evangelism, but not a ton of us, right? And then let's look at the lowest scores. See, the people who want to leave the towels on the floor want to leave the towels on the floor. Ooh, I just like banged my own camera right down. And the people that don't want to evangelize do not want to evangelize, right? So mostly what we have in common is we're lovely people, but we're a bunch of different people. Okay? So I want to open it up. I'm going to ask Melina to open up the conversation and the chat and facilitate this. And let's talk about this, because it may be, and I'm going to fix my camera so that I don't look like somebody's great grandmother's top of their head.
Hi, everyone.
There we go. And see what you think of this idea of, you know, instead of like, let's write down things we can do to have new folks and young folks and more diverse folks. Let's look at ourselves first.
Deb, thanks so much for your session. I want to do this with my Sunday school teachers. I'm curious. Let's check this out. So I asked folks to post in the Q&A if they have any questions. One big question. So how has the assessment process helped your personal ministry?
This has been really good at my parish, because I sort of mentioned in a few ways that, and I showed you our original profile, which was, our folks genuinely wanted to grow, and they genuinely wanted to preserve the sense of family. And what actually happened was, when we talked about this, and I think there are folks from my congregation actually here, but when we started talking about this, what we found was that our folks, and like many Episcopal congregations, our congregation was aging, was that it was really important for our seniors to grasp that these folks were different, but they were wonderful folks that were coming in. And once they grasped that they were not going to be the same, they were not going to parent the same way, they were not cradle, quote unquote, cradle Episcopalians, they were not churched. Once they got all that, they were able to just love folks for who they were. And what's beautiful in our parish is that our new folks got grandparents and family that they didn't have. Our seniors got new grandchildren. And what works in our parish is not anything to do with me. It's the relationship between the folks, right? Is that our seniors who were there and our young folks who came in love each other and care for each other. So that family thing that has always been there is still there, but it's expanded to, be redefined for different, in a different way than they used to look at it.
That's great. And would you say that the parish feels healthier than when you first arrived?
Yeah, like I think I throw out this statistic because it's easiest, but the day that I started at the parish, there was one kid in Godly Play. And I think last Sunday was Family Sunday, but the Sunday before that, there were, I think, 12 kids in Godly Play, and that was coming back from the pandemic. So I think the last Sunday before we shut down for the pandemic, there were 16 kids in Godly Play. So, I mean, there you go.
Well, Deb, we're super grateful for your wisdom and all that you've shared with us today. We have 2 more minutes on the clock. So if you wanted to leave us with any last bits of wisdom, encouragement, go for it.
You know what? The church is alive. The church is going to stay alive. It's going to look different. The church is not dying. God does not change in fundamental ways. And someone recently said, what is the mission in the church for the 21st century? And I said, it is the same as it has always been. Love God, love your neighbor, and go out there and do the work that we've been given to do. And I know that we're going to do that. And so just keep doing that. And thank you for being here at this conference and learning new ways to do that. And God bless you all.
Thank you so much, Deb. And thank you for the resources. If you all want to take those and, practice them in your own parish, I think it's a great idea. It was really fun and great to get to know our own selves in this session. So thank you all so much, and enjoy the rest of your session time with Forma. We've got another day, so hope to catch you soon.